with the microphone,
Yep.
probably need to keep it pretty close. You can actually move it however you want. So,
Well, you'll have to tell me.
What you've done there is perfect. I reckon
Okay.
you just need it a bit closer. So if you just swing the arm closer to you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh,
Perfect.
give it a kiss. We ready to start, Braden?
Sounds good.
You ready to start, Rob?
I'm fine, buddy.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to the Chip Lunch podcast. As always, it's wonderful to have you along with us, whether you are on YouTube or on your favourite podcast app. I'm joined by two wonderful people today. Braden.
Oh, thank you. Starting with love and kindness.
So yeah, starting on a positive note.
Yes.
It's excellent to have you along here.
Excellent
You
to be
said
here.
you have been up late practicing music.
Oh, yeah.
correct?
I was up late practicing music last night for a band night we've got tomorrow. Oh, tonight. Well, tonight. We've shifted. With it's our first combined night with Soul Revival and MCC as well.
Oh,
So our
cool.
youth groups are coming together and we're
Nice.
going to do a band night. It's going to be very fun.
Very
So
cool.
Looking
How many
forward to hanging out with all the crew and having some fun and yeah.
How many songs are you banging out tonight?
We've got 8 down and we might add a few later if we need to.
A few.
Few encore late
Encores.
requests that we might sub in if we need to.
That's
But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to get to play music with a bunch of people who've been playing music with a long time, but it's also very fun to use it as an excuse to get together with churches and have fun and praise God together. So it'll be awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Rob.
Sir, how are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I don't know, do we have many people on the podcast who just only have a moustache? Because I like the
I haven't been
moustache.
counting. I feel like there's a few beards, but I don't
A few
know.
beards, but
Well, I
don't
grew
know
the moustache to frighten my grandchildren about 8 years ago,
Oh, that's a
and they just
smart idea.
laughed and laughed. So
That's cool. Elliot had a moustache.
Ah, yes.
He was on recently, episode 99. This is episode 102, as we said, Rob.
Wow.
Wow. There's been quite a few of them. It doesn't
Quite
feel like we've done
meetings.
100 odd episodes, does it?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I haven't been on 100 of them.
Either have I, though.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So who
Yeah,
ran them
we'll get
before
there.
you did?
Well, I run the ship. But we
Captain, my captain.
yeah, we've swapped in and out, and sometimes I'm away
Yeah.
and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You would be the closest to 100.
I think I've probably been on more than anyone else.
Because there's only a couple where you weren't there at the start, I feel like.
Yeah, there was a few at the start, and then there's
Because that was during lockdown.
correct. That's right. And then there was also a couple of times where I was away where you and Ethan stepped in,
Yeah.
and then we brought it all together on episode 100 with Lou,
Yes.
and here we are.
Yes. And Lee came out today, which is very
Oh, yes,
I
Lee's-
can't give away what date it is, can I? Or
Yeah, it's fine.
People
We
figured out.
We
Is
record a week in
the
advance.
magic dead?
We record a week in advance. So
yes. Okay.
you said tonight, but it's actually would have been last Friday night when this episode.
What a
would come
great
out.
night it was.
Your estimated number of audience, size of audience?
I think it's in the millions.
At least one.
You've been drinking too much tea, I think.
I don't know. It's mainly people from our church, but I think we usually depends on what episode it is, but it usually gets at least 50 downloads.
Okay. Yep.
It's difficult with podcasts to see the actual like how many people are listening to the whole thing, and then the Chip Lunch on YouTube as well, it'll hover between 20 and 50 as well, depending on who's on there. For some reason, and I've said this before, Kim's episode has wildly more downloads than anyone else's. It's like 170 or something. So
I thought Tim's was winning.
Tim's might have been. Tim's is winning on YouTube, I think,
Okay.
because he posted it on his Facebook.
Ah, yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So anyway, post to the Chip Lunch podcast on Facebook. We're starting to put clips out too,
Yeah.
which is
I saw my face popped up the other day. I was very disturbed.
Oh, really?
As I was scrolling through reels. How did this get here? But that was, I think, a shock absorber one. That wasn't a Chip Lunch one.
yeah. Okay. Yep.
But yeah, I saw a clip from Lou's one yesterday. It was very cool.
Yes, put that up yesterday. It was very cool. It's cool with the orange background because we filmed that at Miranda Congregational. Anyway,
We do have a guest.
we do have a guest, Rob. We did introduce you. Thank you for coming on. Have you done a podcast before?
I don't think I have.
Oh,
Yes.
first time for everything.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yes. We always like to start the podcast with one question, which is not why is the rain coming, because I just heard it on the roof, but how do you like to eat your hot chips, Rob?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Look, do not fry them in dripping that's come from beef or lamb, which sort of indicates my background, but only if they've something like olive oil or some oil from a grain.
Yep.
And if you do that, I love them.
Oh, just anything.
Yep.
Do you have now? One of the questions on the podcast is always, what salt do you like on them?
Well, I'm favourable towards both chicken salt and salt.
Oh,
yeah.
That's like Lou when she does half and half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But I think chicken salt is still in the lead. Is that correct?
Oh, it should be. Why no beef? Why no beef tallow or anything like that?
I think it just makes anything you fry in beef tallow and or lamb tallow, because I came off a sheep farm. Tends, I think, in my view, tends to make it a bit fatty. And
bit too thick, kind of thing.
Yeah,
you need something to cut through it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of gone out of fashion anyway.
What? Oh, it has. It has. Oh, absolutely.
I guess vegetable oil is a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Getting into our chip economy podcast, the economics of frying chips.
Yeah.
I was just interested. Do you have any condiments with it as well?
Pepper.
Oh, pepper.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
Oh, okay.
Have we had pepper before? I don't think so. That's cool. Not salt. Oh, you have salt.
Salt.
And, salt
we
and
just
pepper.
talked about salt.
Sorry. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, you've hinted at it before, but I'll ask the question of how did you become a Christian?
Right.
But this seems like it's related to where you grew up on the farm and things like that too. So I'm interested to hear, how did you become a Christian, Rob?
Right. I became a Christian just nearly 16 years of age, 15, heading to 16. And our assistant minister at an Anglican church in Burnie, Tasmania, very interesting guy, and he started to get the youth group together and teach us the Bible. And in that context, I became a Christian. Yeah.
Really? That's cool. And so you said that he was an interesting guy. Why was that? Why did you think that?
That's a very good question. I mean, a 15-year-old or even let alone a 14-year-old isn't very observant. I think it's because he just seemed to be able to speak so clearly about Jesus and sort of focus in, on what, say, the Gospels were saying. Yeah, in that sort of area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And were you family Christians?
My family is certainly a Christian background, both wider and also closer. But my observation was that their Christianity deepened over the years.
Oh, okay.
And later when we came up to Sydney, especially my mother, it deepened very much.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you became a Christian when you were 15, 16, would that mean you were going to church prior to that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So from a young age?
Yeah. So you look at the statistics for that period, you'll find that about 55 to 60% of Australians were church goers. That could mean anything from, say, 3 or 4 times a year to regularly. And I think we were fairly regular church goers, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think you said, did you grow up on a farm?
Yes, my father ran an agricultural business in the town, but also ran a farm on the outskirts. So, he was a busy guy, and he used to get us to help him.
Yep.
Okay.
What did that entail?
Oh, it would depend, of course. What he could get us to do. He had a saying that if you've got two of your sons working together with you, you've got no help at all. If you've got one, you've got some pretty good help.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was mainly sheep?
Yeah, mainly sheep. Okay. Yeah, fat lambs.
Fat lambs?
Oh yeah, that's a very Tasmanian thing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and at one stage, the spud market in Melbourne, most of Tasmanian potatoes on the northwest coast in those days were sold in Melbourne, just this skyrocketed the price. It went up to £50 a tonne. I have no idea what that is in modern terms. Let's say it's $10,000. And every farmer on the northwest coast suddenly started ploughing up every paddock they could and planted spuds. And we did that too.
To make money,
Okay.
obviously.
To make money, yes.
Yeah,
But
okay.
of course the price skyrocketed down well below £50 a tonne
Yeah.
by the time they hit the market.
Yeah, of course.
So we and others had a barn full of spuds we couldn't sell.
Oh, really?
Well, we just fed them to the pigs, yeah.
Right. How big was the farm?
Not that big, probably about 140 acres. I can't do that in hectares quickly. I'd have to pull something out
That's
and
right.
to do the calculations. But the soil, very, very good soil up there. Yeah, they used to joke that you could go out and throw seeds into the ground early morning and go back next morning and reap.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Very, very good topsoil.
I just did the quick calculation, 140 acres, 56.6 hectares.
Fantastic.
There you go.
Glad to know it.
Lucky we've got the internet, hey?
Yeah.
So can you tell me what it's like? I did not grow up on a farm. What's it like growing up on a farm in terms of like the everyday life? Because I feel like it'd be pretty different to, I just lived in a suburban context in the entirety of my life.
Sure. Well, you got to understand, when I say I grew up on a farm, that was sort of part-time. So we lived in Burnie Town.
Okay.
Okay. And occasionally, we'd spend school holidays in the old farmhouse. So growing up on a farm for me was part-time in that sense. And also on the weekends, Dad would grab one or both of us and take us up and get us to help him out.
Well, somewhat anyway. What do you think? How do you think that shapes you as a person growing up on a farm or being a part-time farmer compared to anyone else that just grew up in the city?
Oh, I don't know enough to answer that question. I think I think it shaped me in the sense that I really do appreciate agriculture, if I can put it that way. I like driving out in the countryside, and once or twice I've been out on Christian work in rural areas, and always have enjoyed it very much. So it gives you an appreciation for how the rural part works. Also, of course, we lived in a town. I mean, it was massively sized. I think it was 15,000 at peak, so it was pretty big. I'm joking, of course.
I was going to say, because I looked it up on the map and I was like, it doesn't look like a huge place.
Oh, well, it was less in the 1950s and 1960s, I'm
Right.
sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So where is it? It's on the north coast.
Northwest coast?
Yeah, it's
Ah.
right on the, I'm just zooming out. Yeah,
wow.
northwest. Yeah, that part of Tasmania.
Oh, yes.
It's also, was then, but is now, I think, also a port, a very important port.
Is it?
So that was an interesting place to grow up in that sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've been to Tasmania. It's a very nice place.
Were your parents from there? Like, how did they end up there?
Well, my parents and most of my relatives are Tasmanian,
Yeah.
but they came from more down the Hobart way, south.
Okay.
My father moved around a bit. He was on the east coast for a while on his father's farm. They were full-time farmers,
Yeah. Okay.
and his father moved into real estate. So
Okay.
in Hobart.
Oh, wow.
I think he told me once that he made more in 1 year that he in selling real estate in Hobart than he'd made in 10 years on the farm.
Okay. So you can understand the career change. Wow. So then from becoming a Christian from 15, 16, as you
Yep.
said, what's life look like after that? And the question I often ask people is when they tell us when they became Christians, what changed for you after that time?
Well, I think what changed for me was that I could see the direction, a definite direction I was going in. That is, I understood God's path, if I can put it that way. And therefore that then forms your values or continues to form your values. So as you try and move down that path, so to speak, as a follower of Jesus, you learn to say no to some things much more clearly than some of your companions will say no to, and yes to other things, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's a growth, of course.
Yeah. I just you saying that makes me think of a lot of people have come on here like, from when they became a Christian. What they said yes to and what they said no to became a lot clearer. Is that the same case for you?
Yeah, I would say that would be the case, especially when you're 15 or 16, because you're in that period anyway of growth when you're starting to clarify your mind on where you sit in the world and so on, what you're going to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then from then, what was your kind of thoughts around finishing school?
Well, can I quickly backtrack a little bit?
Of course.
What did school look like
good
in Burnie?
Oh, it was terrific.
Yeah.
We used to walk to school.
Yeah.
About I'd have to guess a bit, but probably about 2 or 3 miles. What's that in kilometres?
1.6.
1.6.
No, you got to
No, that's terrible.
Okay,
Even I know that's wrong.
Hang on. No.
I was like, wow, that's...
Well, let's just round it and say 3 kilometres.
3 miles, 4.8.
It might have only been 1.8
wow,
or
it's
whatever.
almost 5. Okay.
It's a long walk, though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a long walk. No, not if you're a country guy.
Yeah.
Besides, you're walking into the West Wind, where the school was, and the West Wind in Tasmania, especially along that coast, is really strong. I mean, there's no islands between Tasmania and South Africa, and that's where the wind comes from. So.
Yeah.
And real rain, not the spitter spatter stuff we're getting at the moment.
Yeah.
No, went to Burnie High School, a very good school. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But we, as they say, we loaded the truck up when I was about 16, and we drove through Melbourne, and my father came and took up work here in Sydney. So I spent the last 2 years of high school at Normanhurst Boys High.
Okay.
Yeah.
How big of a numbers change was that? So, like, how many people were at Burnie High School? How many people were at
Well,
Normanhurst?
you got to understand that 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds don't sort of really concern themselves with those sort of questions, but I would think, the terrible guess, maybe 300 at Burnie High.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't know.
Okay.
However, Normanhurst Boys High was much bigger,
Yeah.
and my guess is probably 600. But I did know that when we got into fifth year, which was the final year then, the leaving certificate.
Well, fifth form or whatever.
Yeah, fifth form, whatever they call it. We were the largest cohort in New South Wales to the leaving certificate to that point in history.
Really?
I think there were over 200 of us, might have been 220.
Wow.
What
Who
year
sat the
was
leaving
that?
certificate.
What year was that?
Oh, you're pushing it here, buddy.
We can cut that question out if you want.
Probably 1964.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the set book for English then, the set Shakespeare and text for English that year was Macbeth, which I enjoyed very much, I might say. Yeah.
Can you remember any lines from it?
No, not very much, but, I can sort of remember the feel and the crazy lady walking around, and let alone Macbeth, yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking up best lines from Macbeth.
Good to know the curriculum.
Well, ask an
hasn't
AI.
changed too
I mean,
much.
it'll probably recite it for you.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
will. Oh, 60 significant quotes from Macbeth. Fair is foul and foul is fair.
Yes.
What bloody man is that? If you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not.
True words never spoken.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
true. What can the devil speak true? There's daggers in men's smiles. That's what I think of you, Braden.
Context is everything.
Yeah. Double, toil
Oil
and trouble,
and
fire burn, and cauldron
Yeah.
bubble. That's a famous one. I've heard that
Yeah,
one
that's the
before.
three witches.
Start,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Why did your family decide to move to Melbourne and then obviously up to Sydney? What was the plan there?
Well, obviously, a teenager doesn't know the full depth of background, but Tasmania's biggest export is her children, because the number of cousins and nieces and nephews that have migrated across the ocean to Melbourne and further north in order to find work. So my father just was offered a better job in the machinery sales, and in this case it was trucks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was white trucks. I don't know if white trucks are still sold, but he moved from there into, I've forgotten the name, Kenworth Trucks.
Oh, yep.
And became national head of the national distribution of Kenworth Trucks. So he did pretty well in that industry up here. I think with that sort of insight, so to speak, we moved.
So do you get on I mean, the Spirit of Tasmania wasn't there at the time. What do you
I
get?
think it's still there. Yeah.
What do you get on at that long ago? What do you get? You just get on a barge across to Melbourne? What's going on?
Well, the best of my knowledge, you drive on and then you drive off the other end.
Okay, very good.
And it's still the case because, God willing, my wife and I and a few friends are going to head south again and have a couple of months in Tasmania.
Oh, nice.
Next year. So
That's lovely.
Yep.
Very cool. And then so you drove up from Melbourne to Sydney?
Yeah.
Do you remember what car you were driving?
Yeah. Oh, a Valiant.
You would like this
No, a
question.
Valiant.
Good
A
question.
Valiant. My father
Valiant.
also sold Valiants.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
What didn't he do? He was doing everything.
Well, you got to understand, it's a small country town, so if you're an agricultural machinery business, you sell everything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, it was a white Valiant. Beautiful vehicle. It's before they changed the shape and made it boring, made them look like Fords. So.
Bloody Fords.
Yeah.
Valiant.
So we got a guess, probably be 1962 or 63. Could be around about there. Yep.
Very cool.
That's very cool. So then, if you finish at Normanhurst,
Yep.
because finishing year, as you said, what was your plan after school?
Okay. I wanted to study medicine, so I entered medical faculty
Oh, wow.
at Sydney University and managed to fail twice in 3 years. And so that said, there's the door. You can't continue on in medicine. By that stage, I started to get my act together because I didn't come from an academic family, and work out how to better study. And I finished up doing a science degree in biochemistry and microbiology.
Wow.
Which I enjoyed very much, and then went on to work as a scientific officer at Prince of Wales Hospital and Prince Henry before they sold it and turned it into flats.
Yeah. That's a pretty big shift going from like maybe your background to going straight into medicine. Did you enjoy school? Like, was that obviously you were somewhat gifted academically if you've made that jump to at least giving medicine a go and then sciences?
Yeah, I didn't dislike school. I don't know. I don't know how happy I made my teachers. I think I improved towards the end of school, my behaviour, than earlier on. I certainly got less cuts of the cane later on. But, yeah, I enjoyed school, but I didn't get wrapped in school, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And my interest in my church and youth group and so on was growing.
Yeah.
And that became an important facet of my life. But no, I thought school was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did moving to Sydney change church context-wise? What did that look like for you?
That is hard to say.
Yeah.
Both churches, both the one in Burnie and up here, were Anglican. I think in those days they would have said the Burnie one was low Anglican. Tasmania is very much more mixed in its levels of Anglicanism than Sydney. It's not so much now. It's much more, evangelicalism is much more widespread in Tasmania than it was then. And so in that sense, probably the churches were much the same. But on the other hand, in some aspects, looking back, the church we went to in Sydney was also middle church as well as low church, if I can put it that way.
Okay.
In terms of like a jargon check, what is middle church, low church, high Anglican, low Anglican?
Okay, well, to give you a bit of history here, the Anglican churches, right from the 16th century onwards, have been, shall we say, marked by two things in a way. One is a liturgy, which is written prayers, which you would follow. They would have some variations within it, of course, but basically the same sort of pattern each Sunday. And those prayers would be taken from the Bible and would be good Bible thoughts. So they're very good prayers, even though your ability to grasp them may be slightly beyond you, but I'll come back to that if you like later on, why we had to move towards simplifying the way we express prayers in church. And the other thing that I think in general would characterise Anglicanism was teaching from the Bible. Now this could be done well or badly or very good, if I might put it that way, but certainly there was a place for that to happen every meeting, every service. And the third thing would be a sort of a concentration on a formality.
Yeah.
in the way that you present yourself. So there'd be special clothing
Yeah.
and so forth, and that would range from really, shall we say, Roman Catholic end
Yeah.
down to something fairly, very simple, but
Okay.
still formal
Yeah.
at the low church end.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
high church closer to maybe Catholicism in terms of
Yeah,
presentation.
And
yeah.
robe-
But
robes
always in
Robes,
English.
and
It was always in English. Yeah.
but maybe a bit.
Yeah.
More,
And the priest was likely to be married, so
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then low church, more maybe less formal, but still, I'm assuming if it's church in the 60s,
yeah.
more formal than
Yeah.
maybe
suit,
thongs and
but-
boardies.
Yeah.
So that really only started to change in Sydney on a broad front
Yeah.
in the 1980s and following
Right.
Yeah.
to where we are now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to go back to the old days? What do you prefer now, in terms of that stuff?
No, not especially. I mean, there are things we should always look, I think, fairly positively but critically. When I use the word critical, I don't mean necessarily negative,
Yeah.
but thinking
Critique.
critique.
it,
That's the
yeah.
word I want. Critique,
Yeah.
as well as deciding what's positive and negative. And there are some things I think we've lost in moving out of a set liturgy. I think the things we've lost are sometimes the breadth of prayers that are in the liturgy, so they cover much more of the Christian life,
Okay.
and sometimes some of the depth. So there's some of the things we've had to come to grips with as we've moved away from liturgy. My observation, at least in Sydney, is that liturgical background still obviously comes through in the way we do services much more informally now, and in that I think we're blessed. So we do have a good range of prayers in church, and I think they do cover a good number of topics, and with some with appropriate theological insight, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's. I think you've revealed your background in theological study,
Right.
which is
let's
like,
move on.
No,
right?
no, that's
Yeah.
fine. We're okay to jump around here. That's totally fine. But we'll maybe come back to your the point that you reached at some point. But I just want to go back to you when you were a scientist to begin with.
Yeah.
What did that involve if you're working in the hospitals and those kind of things? What were you actually doing?
Well, you've got to understand the context back in the late 60s. It's a fairly broad context, and I won't talk about all that context, but one part of it was the expansion of services, hospital services, the way we do things administratively, the way we build roads and so on. All that was starting to change.
Yep.
Now, one of the benefits of doing a science degree was not everyone, a lot of people wanted you to work for them. There was a shortage of people with science degrees, and more were needed. So I got my first job before I actually graduated. So I walked into a laboratory down at Circular Quay, which used to be on top. It might still be owned by the Commonwealth Government, and on the third floor and the fourth floor were dedicated to testing materials. In our case, it was testing for salmonella, believe it or not, in meat and milk from virtually every dairy and butchery. It's not the right word for it. Slaughterhouse in New South Wales.
Yeah,
abattoir.
Abattoir, thank you, brother. Abattoir, and from south of Queensland, to test it for salmonella and to see if it was negative, so it could be exported. Okay. So that's the first job I had was there. Upstairs, by the way, they did real forensic. This was Commonwealth Police. And you couldn't get up there without a pass. But anyway, but sometimes we'd speak to them as we went up and down the lift.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I walked into there about 3 months before I graduated, and I asked, could I have the job? And they said yes. That was the interview. It was quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so I worked there, and it was interesting work, but it wasn't that interesting. It actually was quite boring.
Oh, okay.
And in those days, they tailored the work that you have to do this. You have to treat all the samples they come in, and when that's done, the spare time after that, you have to sit down and read journals,
Right.
Okay.
scientific journals. And you realise that after a while, this is a fairly boring occupation. It's important to do, but I don't have the right mindset to do that sort of thing all the time. Just drives me crackers. I could have done what my immediate boss did. He built a house using the telephone on his desk in his spare time. Okay.
Yeah.
So I then moved over to the hospital system.
Okay.
The New South Wales hospital system, where there's much more work.
Okay.
And again, I had plenty of overtime because there weren't enough scientific officers, and that helped I and my wife build a house as well. So I had a lot of overtime,
That's cool.
which was very helpful.
Yep.
On the other thing that happened then, I don't know why I'm boring you with this, but you did ask.
No.
Okay.
This is good.
I got a letter, I think, after 3 months of graduation from New South Wales Education Department. Look, would you like to come and teach science in a high school? You don't need a diploma of education. We're waivering that for anyone who will step straight into science. You can do your diploma of education part-time and we will pay for it. And not only that, you will start at level year 3 salary, not year
Really?
1.
Oh wow! So they really wanted
They
something.
needed some science.
That's right.
teachers.
So that's how desperate we were.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I don't really want to teach people who were like me when I was in high school. So I stayed in the hospital system
Yeah.
Okay.
until I moved into theology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I do remember that Braden asked a question about church. So I'm trying to put everything together here. But if you went to Normanhurst Boys High, were you
Yep.
in a church in that area?
Yes, at Wahroonga,
Okay.
if you know your suburbs. It's
A
up
little
on the
bit.
corner. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you also said that youth group was really important to you then. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Really? And why was that?
Well, I think for 2 reasons. A lot of people went to youth group. In a sense, it was a place where parents would send their children. Parents who didn't go to church would send their children so that they could meet other youth and be in a safe environment, as we would call it today, and so on. Now that's by and large finished, I think. Certainly it is in most suburbs. The youth groups are much smaller now. And what has happened here more recently in Sutherland Shire through Stuart Crawshaw, I think is unusual. Very good, but it's unusual. So what can I say? So that was it. That was an important part of my life on Friday nights and Sundays.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that answer the question? Or?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
What did it look like other than being bigger? Like, what did you do at youth group?
Oh, well, we did a bunch of stuff, you know.
Yeah. If you were rocking up on a Friday night, what would that look like for you?
It's a very good question. I don't remember very well, actually.
Yeah.
You'd play a few games, I think. Certainly, you could often eat together. At least once a month, eat together. And there might be someone who would give a talk, if I can put it that way. Okay, and then you'd sort of finish up and go home.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the details of the finer details escape me, if I may say so.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
all right. You may say so. You're very welcome to.
Yeah.
And then also in that, you've also mentioned your wife. So when did you meet your wife?
Well,
Oh.
we met together at Sydney University in our first year.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
In the context of the Evangelical Union.
I thought I was going to
Okay.
ask you that. Is that where you meet?
Yeah. So I was as most of us are, you're on a bit of a pilgrimage as a Christian, and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go to university next year. I'm enrolled there, and I'm going to decide whether I'm going to take Christianity seriously. So I'll think about which Christian group I will join. Should I join a Christian group? So I went and spoke to 2 major Christian groups, and there were actually 3, but I didn't visit the third one, which was the Anglican Christian group. There was the SCM, and the EU, Evangelical Union, and the whatever SCM stands for.
Don't look at me.
Sydney Christian something?
No, you can look it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Historically, it's there.
You keep talking.
Okay, I will. Okay. So I decided, a bit immaturely, I think, I decided those who were the most friendly to me when I walked up to their stall, I would start to attend their meetings. And it turned out the Evangelical Union was that mob. So,
okay, yeah. Fair enough.
And so in that context, because in those days we were big enough, the Evangelical Union was the largest student group on Sydney University campus with 600 members.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was nothing, you know. You'd go to a Communist Party meeting, which I do from time to time. No, sorry, Socialist Party, Party, which I did occasionally. You know, there'd be 35 people there. Yeah. But so what am I saying? In that context, answer your question, I met my wife.
So you're on a list. Good to know.
Well, each faculty, not each faculty, but it was so large we were broken up into faculty groups.
Okay.
So the medical faculty had a fairly large cohort. Yeah. Who would meet together.
Was she in the medical faculty?
Yeah, she was doing medicine 1.
Okay.
And unlike me, she finished.
Hey.
Yeah.
SCM, I think, is Student Christian Movement.
It is.
I think
it is. Yep.
Seems like it started in Edinburgh.
It did, and it was started by an evangelical preacher.
Very cool.
That's what it seemed like.
And like a lot of things, it evolved over the time, and evolved into more theological liberalism, and that's in that context the Evangelical Union. We wasn't called it in those days, but that's where it arose.
Yeah, right. I was just trying to find his name, but I can't see it anywhere at the moment. Yeah. So you said you stayed in the hospital system until you decided to become a lecturer, or you worked in theological study?
Yeah, the theological study with a view to becoming a minister of a church.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So when did that happen?
Okay, well, in the context of being in youth fellowship, etc., and doing, helping out with leadership, the then curate said to me, "You ought to think very seriously about becoming, going into full-time ministry, Christian ministry." Right. And I immediately thought, well, I say, well, I'm going to do that. They've got enough. They've got enough failures in the Christian ministry without me. No, I actually thought that. Wow. The last thing they need is another. At this stage, I was obviously heading towards yet another failure in medicine. You see, so the last thing I think they really need for the benefit of the church is someone who can't cut the mustard academically. So but in that context, that would be put into my mind. So then in that context we were married. My wife and I started to think and pray carefully about this, and so I decided about maybe after 6 months working as scientific officer, that's where eventually I would head towards. Yeah. Okay. So we gave ourselves 2 years working as scientific officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you haven't mentioned your wife's name.
Roslyn, Roslyn.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. And then, so did you get married before you went into Christian ministry or after?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And you also built a house over the phone like the other guy or not?
Yes, but it wasn't the work phone, the best of my knowledge anyway. No, it wasn't the work phone.
Right.
We got married in my first year of work as scientific officer, so... And we were able to rent a very, very cheap flat before they pulled it down in Coogee.
Oh, in Coogee.
And it had a phone installed. No, I had to get a phone installed because I had an on-call work at night, you see.
Oh, did you?
And the whatever it was called, those telco came and put a phone in for me. I think that's the phone I used to build the house, yes, at Hornsby.
Right. So it wouldn't have been telecom back then even. It would have been something before that.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
I can't even remember what that would have been.
No, I can't either. Yeah.
Did Rosalind go into medicine?
She did. Yeah. And she's still, she only just retired about 2 months ago.
Really? Oh, wow.
Cool.
Doing, what does she usually focus on?
General practice. Okay. She's done a number of specialist things, not so much in Australia but overseas in palliative care, but general practice, yeah.
Wow.
Well, okay. You guys are forging ahead in the medicine space. That's pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah. So then you moved to Coogee.
Yep.
And then when are you taking up when have you decided, I can be a minister, not a failure, like you said?
Yeah, well, as I said, just at the beginning of my time as a scientific officer, having passed my science degree in the biological sciences, I thought, yeah, well, maybe I can do that.
Right.
That is, go and study to become a minister.
At Moore College?
Yeah.
Right. And just what was that like for you, going to Moore College?
Oh, it was very interesting. Very good time.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting group I ended up with, and some very interesting teachers.
Oh, why do you say that?
Yeah. Oh, just because they were. Yeah.
Oh, they just
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
What year was that?
Well, that's a very good question again. 71, 73. I think we graduated in 75. Is that 4 years? You do the maths. I can't be right. Excuse me.
So 71.
No.
72.
72,
Oh.
73, 74, 75. That's 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
Very cool. And then out of there, you're like, I'm getting a job.
Yeah, so I worked assistant minister or curate, as they called him in those days, at Willoughby
Okay.
for about 2.5 years. And during that time, I decided it would be good if I could increase my knowledge of theology, to deepen that. And the best way of doing that is do further study.
Mm-hmm.
And on advice from Broughton Knox, who had been my principal when I was a student at Moore College, I tried doing a master's degree part-time, and that didn't work for me. I come from a family who work very long hours, and I'm part of that, if I can put it that way, so I didn't have enough time to do that. So I decided that if I was going to do further Christian studies, then I would have to do it full-time. And I might as well go and have a shot at a PhD. So I applied to a couple of universities overseas to do something in the area of John Calvin.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay, go.
Like we're about to delve into, I'm sure, deeper academic
Yeah.
study. What do you think? You
You
obviously
look fearful.
No, well,
No.
yes. Well, it's not exactly my cup of tea, but it is. It is
Yes,
a lot
it
of
is.
people's
It is,
cup of
it
tea.
is, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
mean,
dipped
you're
my
in full
toe in the
fear.
water. I dipped my
Yeah.
toe in the water
For the
and
purpose
Yeah.
of this podcast, at least.
Obviously, college would have been a big shift from going out of that in the workforce. What do you think? How do you think God grew you in that time? Like, how did you see God work in your life as you've made that shift from working full time to
Being a student at Moore College.
being a student and Christian ministry as more of a aim and a formal thing in your life?
Well, look, ballpark, one of God's promises, which is given to us in its sort of foundational form as a statement of Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, so one man's face sharpens another.
Yeah,
That is, we learn through relationships.
yeah,
And the best, the best way to understand any area of knowledge is, in fact, it's to do it face to face
yeah.
with people who, in a cohort who are pursuing the same sort of knowledge. You're going to learn off each other.
Yeah.
If you discipline yourselves, of course. I mean, if you're just mad and drunk and so on, that's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, take note, Brad.
Okay.
It's not coffee.
So in that context, being at Moore College full time and also living on campus in one of the, shall we say, shacks, gives you the opportunity to learn together as a cohort and discuss things and so forth and so on.
You're really immersed in it.
Really immersed. And in that, I found that my Christian knowledge deepened.
Yeah,
Very much so. And very much more than, say, my first degree in science.
yeah,
Okay.
Although I enjoyed that very much.
yeah.
Okay.
Then did you ended up, did you go overseas to study John Calvin?
Yes, I did.
Where
I
did you go?
Okay. Well, I ended up going to University of Aberdeen in Scotland.
Ah,
Okay. I applied to an American university and to English universities. And American university, there was no way I was going to get in, so I didn't. Actually, I applied to two, I think, in America, or was it three? Anyway, basically, the two English universities, Cambridge and Oxford, said, "Look, we're interested in your project, but there's really no one on faculty who could supervise you.
Okay.
And one said, call back later and see if we can find somebody. But when I wrote to the University of, the professor at the University of Aberdeen, who I knew to be a Calvin scholar, I got back a handwritten letter.
I was about to say, when you said you wrote to them, it's not exactly an email, is it? It's a bit
No.
process.
Yeah, process typed, right.
Yeah.
and the sort of, shall we say, most of the replies, especially from America, were just pro forma.
Yeah.
Been run off a cassette, run off some sort of machine somewhere. But that's okay.
Yeah.
But this was in his own writing. And he said yes, he'd be interested in that, etc., and encouraged me. And I had been told by the Archbishop of Sydney, because I took this plan over with the Archbishop of Sydney. It's always good to keep those who are looking after you from upstairs in mind in these things. So I showed the letter to one of his bishops, and his bishop said, "My boy, that's a word from God. You've got to go to Aberdeen." So what else could I do? Bishops must be obeyed. So that's what I did. Yeah.
How did your wife take this plan to move to Aberdeen?
Very well.
Yeah.
Very supportive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Had you started a family by
We
that point?
had two children, and we came back with 4. So
So you're there for a bit of time.
for just over 3.5 years, or just under 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 questions about that. But why Calvin? Why did you want to study Calvin so much?
Well, I don't know. Braden can tell us this, but in those days, you had to sign a piece of paper at Moore College towards the end of your 4 years, saying, "I have read Calvin's Institutes cover to cover."
Yeah.
Okay. And indeed, I had done that, and indeed with some discussion with about parts of it with colleagues, and also some of his writings would come up in the context of discussing being taught theology by Broughton Knox. So Calvin is clearly one of the great scholars of the Reformation period, and again, as you would expect in those days. What's the word for it? It'll come to me in a moment. I'd say multifaceted, but that's not the right word. He's across several disciplines. So
Multidisciplinary?
Multidisciplinary, thank you very much. Multidisciplinary. So he was a biblical exegete of some depth. As with Luther, he had made sure that he understood not just Latin, but also Greek and Hebrew. Okay, and he was also a theologian, and he was also running a church. So he had a very wide as well as deep grasp of Christian truth and its practice.
And doctrine and things like that.
And he also writes very well.
Right.
Okay. In a sense, very clearly. Historically speaking, in fact, it's acknowledged that the way he wrote biblical commentaries changed the way that people wrote in those days, and became the foundation for the way we write biblical commentaries today.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So all that was like you wanted to go deeper on learning more
so
about Calvin.
I wanted to explore a problem in Calvin in a way that would force me to read right across Calvin. And try and work, look at the foundations and so on, and how they might speak about this particular problem I was taking to Calvin to solve for me. Not to solve for me, but to answer my question.
What was the question?
Okay, well, the primary question is, how do we make moral decisions as a Christian?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and how does Calvin view that?
Yep.
So it's kind of like the ethics of Calvin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my first thought, and this is back in Sydney, was natural law.
Yeah.
Which was very big in those days, and indeed had some import into Western culture right up, I think, until after the Second World War. Traceably so, but it's now gone, unfortunately, I think, from most of our legal thinking, our jurisprudence and so on, which is sad. But so my question was, what is his view of natural law? Okay, and I very, very quickly moved into, no, that needs to be refined as a question. our moral decisions, and I got this from a piece of secondary literature written by an ethicist, and it clearly was true for Calvin, our moral decisions are actually made in the context of a wide number of factors, a wide number of truths. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I moved from just natural law, and I did read Calvin with a view to understanding how he understood and used natural law, and there was something there, but he wasn't like Thomas Aquinas. He didn't do everything from natural law. He would appeal to it from time to time. So it wasn't deep in the foundations. It wasn't the foundations, but it wasn't, shall we say, one of the major structures, if I could put it that way. It was an informative part, but it wasn't, so to speak, foundational.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that one of the greatest foundations was union with Christ. Excuse me. I can have a drink of water again. Union with Christ.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a thesis basically looking right across the range of his theology, seeing how he talked about union with Christ and the impact of that in the last chapter on moral decision making.
Yeah.
Okay, so the title of the thesis, I can't remember the exact title, but it's about 35 words long. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. But the thesis ended up really being union with Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That gave me a platform on which to explore his whole theology and inform my own theology.
Very cool.
Okay.
That is cool.
Yeah.
How long was that, sorry? How long?
You mean how many words?
Yeah, you can tell me that, but also how long did it take you to write those words?
Oh, okay. 3.5 years we were in and out. Okay.
Yeah.
But my wife and I worked very hard and and we bought an electric typewriter with one of those sort of golf bally things. I forgot what they're called now, but second hand.
Yeah.
And I would dictate and she would type. So,
Oh, wow.
Really?
Teamwork.
yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it was teamwork, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That reminds me, there's a writer called Robert Caro who wrote, he's still writing a biography on Lyndon Johnson, the one of the American presidents.
Yeah, president, yeah.
And he's written 4 books on it already, and he's currently in the 5th one, and he does the same thing. He does all the research and everything himself, but then his wife actually types it out.
Yeah. Well, since the inventing of the computer, I have to do my own typing.
What was your favourite thing about Aberdeen, and what was your least favourite thing about Aberdeen?
Oh,
It's pretty similar weather-wise to Tasmania.
well, we enjoyed Aberdeen very much across a breadth of things. So I ran a church. I was running a church part-time there, and that gave me the rectory to live in. Didn't give me much in the way of income.
That's helpful. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But
at least somewhere to live, at least.
Yeah, and therefore, serving Christian people and meeting with them, small number, because the Episcopal Church, as it's called, which is sort of the equivalent of an Anglican church in Scotland, is a small denomination. And although it had historically been about a third of the churchgoers in Aberdeen, in the 1920s, 30s, maybe up to the 40s, the time I got there was, quite small.
Yeah.
The Presbyterian is the major denomination. So in that context, so what was the question I'm trying to answer?
I was just saying, what did you
Aberdeen.
enjoy about Aberdeen, and what was something you didn't enjoy as much?
We enjoyed our church.
Yeah.
And things that go with that.
Yeah.
Being with people and talking with people. What else did we enjoy? My wife got medical work part-time, and she enjoyed that very much. In fact, the Christian doctors in Aberdeen had set up a specialist practice just for people who, shall we say, live off the street.
Oh, yeah.
Because many of them will not go to to a normal practice.
Yeah.
They feel out of place and so on.
Yeah.
So there was a refuge down in the centre of Aberdeen, and so she used to go down there several hours a day, and there were a couple of nurses involved as well.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's really
she enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
Very interesting stories came out of that.
Yeah.
And we'd be walking around Aberdeen, and all sorts of strange people would wave to us. Well, wave to my wife, and therefore to me because I was beside her.
Yeah.
No, we enjoyed Aberdeen very much, I think, in that way, and we had 2 extra children, and all 4 of them were starting to grow up.
Did they get a Scottish accent?
Oh yes,
What a blessing.
we came back to. I came back to a job in Moore College, and the cook then he had a really, really deep Scottish accent because he only migrated out here when I think he was about 20, and he just loved talking to our kids. At least for the first 12 months. After that, they lost it.
Oh, did they? Okay, that's funny how that happens.
Yeah,
eh?
it does. Yeah.
What was the worst part about Aberdeen? I don't think we got that.
Oh,
Well, you didn't enjoy the most anyway.
okay. Oh, even the cold weather you get to enjoy after a while. Excuse me.
Did you want me to grab you some more water?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, bro. Yeah. Cold weather? Well, we stopped, have we?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Cold. You got used to the cold weather.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It had its challenges. I purchased a second-hand bike so I'd ride to university. It was the first time I actually owned a bike, and it was downhill to university and backhill up. So it was good for burning calories. But I set off one day, and suddenly I and the bike are about 5 metres from where we were. We did an ice patch.
I was going to ask you, was it ice? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so you get used to that, and you start to pick your way much more carefully.
Yeah, you got to obviously recognise it when it's on the road. And
You do eventually, yes, you do.
And it was University of Aberdeen, is that?
University of Aberdeen was the last university created in the medieval period.
Oh,
It was created at the end of the medieval period. Let's say end of about 1485, something like that. And it was therefore the second university in Scotland. And so Scotland at that point had 2 universities and England had 2.
Wow.
And so the Scots, compared to the English, had more higher education per capita than the English did, if I can put it that way. But you must understand that Aberdeen was, in many respects, a country town a long way away from Edinburgh. Yeah.
Right.
But it served the north of Scotland. Yeah.
So you're there for 3.5 years writing your PhD.
Yep.
And then you said you went over there with 2 children.
Yes.
And then came back with 2 more.
We did, yes.
And then you said you also worked very hard. And your wife is also working part-time in some version of medical practice.
Yeah.
But then also helping you write your PhD.
Yes, yeah.
How did you guys make it all work? Like, it sounds like there was a lot going on.
Well, you
especially in a new country.
Yeah, well, you've got to talk to each other a lot. Okay, so you've got to communicate, and you got to fall into a pattern, and you've got to look out for each other. Okay, so just like every other marriage, I think, in many respects. If you're busy, you're busy. If you're not busy, you're not busy. So, yeah.
What? Tell us about your family, though. Who are your children?
Who are my children? Well, I've one is deceased. My oldest daughter has died, but I have a son and 2 daughters. Okay, and my son Michael, he's an Anglican minister at Baralla.
Okay,
that's over near Parramatta.
Yep.
Over that area, if you're familiar with that.
Similar,
Yeah,
not similar.
okay.
I know vaguely the area. I should say.
And 2 daughters.
Yep.
Yeah. One lives in this sort of area here. She's moved into the Shire over near Cronulla, and the other one lives out at Ingleburn.
Okay. Do you mind me asking what happened to your other daughter? Is that what you said?
She died of complications for rheumatoid arthritis, which hit her like a truck, if I can put it that way, when she was about 19.
19.
Yeah, and she died when she was 30.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough. So then you moved back to Australia.
We did.
Because you've got the PhD, so you're waving the big piece of paper around?
No. I didn't have PhD
many
at that
pieces of
stage.
paper.
No, sorry. No. You got to wait for the examiners to do it.
Oh, okay.
And then they let you know. And usually you have to then go and speak to your examining panel face to face. They then ask you awkward questions. So on my way out, I said to my professor, I said, do understand that at that time in Scotland, you only had 2 examiners, your supervisor and someone he had chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Nowadays, it's usually 3 complete strangers.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So it was much more sort of relaxed from that point of view. And I asked him on the way out, look, I take it I'll have to fly back. And he said, my boy, he said, with his Scottish accent. We don't normally ask someone to come back from that far distance for a face-to-face examination. So I just got a piece of paper in the mail around about April saying I'd passed.
Were you already back in Australia by then?
I was.
Yeah, right.
I was
So
working
I'm not
at Moore
coming
College.
back.
Yeah. So Moore College employed me without my PhD.
Okay.
And I had a 5-minute... in fact, it was almost as short as my interview for my first job as this scientific officer with the Commonwealth Government down in Circular Quay. Broughton Knox came and he was travelling around with his family in England, as he did from time to time, and he stayed with us for a couple of days. And I think over a cup of tea he said, "Hey, Robert, what do you think you might do when you get back?" And I said, well, Broughton, I think I'm just happy to go back into parish ministry, and that's what I'll apply for. And he said, "Hey, Robert, would you come and work with us?" And I said, "Oh, okay."
Okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was it.
So you kind of almost knew you probably have a job when you come back.
I did, yeah. Yep.
What was that job?
A lecturer at Moore College.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing that for? Or did you do that for?
Okay, so I started lecturing beginning of 1982. I think it was 82, or was it 81?
I don't know. You tell me.
Sure.
I think
I wasn't born.
I think I gave my last lecture probably about... Not necessarily, probably about 2018. So you can do the maths on that.
Okay. Yeah. Why do you look at me?
You've got the internet in front of you. Just type it in there, it'll tell you. Yeah.
There's be people on there'll be people on the podcast going, "Oh, these guys can't do maths." I'm trying to do it. I'm about to ask a question.
You're related to Leo. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm related. Yeah. I gave him the memory. I didn't give him. I didn't give him the maths ability.
That's close to 40 years, is it, or something like that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's right.
Round it up.
Yep, round it up. Yeah, round it up like we did with.
Say 35. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll round it up like we did with the population of Burnie, and also how many podcast listeners we've got.
No, you're quite exact on the number of podcasts.
Yeah. Well, not listeners, but a number of podcasts.
Listeners,
yes, right.
Yeah.
So, if you did it, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I it's such a broad thing to ask a question about, but is that what you thought God wanted you to be, like what you were called to be?
Well, that begs a question on what do you understand is calling?
Love it.
Okay. And one of the questions that was pushed around in my cohort group when we were theological students, and in the context of Broughton Knox and other lecturers, including Donald Robinson, was that you would try and bring those sort of questions to what Scripture teaches, and you'd bring it to critique the question. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you might find a surprising answer, but that surprising answer should become your friend, okay? If you have to adjust your original understanding or even reject it, okay? So in that context, a dear friend of mine, I remember he gave a sermon on this, but we'd been talking about this for a while when we were students. Calling in the Bible isn't, we tend to think of, and probably we've done it for centuries and centuries, I would think since at least Calvin and probably earlier, we think calling is a calling to a vocation, okay? I'm called to be whatever. And a Christian, and we still use that language, and a Christian will think in terms of is God guiding me? Is he calling me to become a teacher or a truck driver or whatever, okay, or to marry a certain person, okay? But that's not, in fact, how the New Testament presents calling. If you look very, very carefully at, say, the beginning of Paul's letter, I think 1 Corinthians will do there, where he says, I, Paul, an apostle, a called one for Jesus Christ. That's almost literally a literal translation of the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we've translated that often as called to be an apostle.
Okay.
Vocation. Get it?
Yeah.
Okay. But the Greek won't stand that. You're called, it's a title, alongside the title of apostle, there's the title called, but it's with respect to Jesus Christ. Now you then start to track out the use of call language more broadly through the other writers of the New Testament, and you'll see our calling is called to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, of course, what we talk about in this church. Okay? One way. So called to be a follower of Jesus. And that brings, and with it, if you look at carefully at the surrounding text, both great status. You're now a son and daughter of God. Jesus Christ is your heavenly brother who prays for you at the right hand of the Father. You are precious to God in his sight. Okay? You are the people of God, etc. And also it brings with it great responsibility. That is, you should act. You see the way the call language is used. You should act in certain ways because you are called to Christ in the way we treat each other. Ethics, if you like, morality, kindness, telling our neighbours about the gospel and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you say, was I called to, did I feel that I was guided or called to be a lecturer? The answer is no.
Yep.
If I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So the yes comes out of, it's a way of serving and God's people and others, okay, and a way of looking after my family and putting food on the table, etc. All those sort of things go with it. And secondly, it was an opportunity that was before me. That is, the second thing is the law of the nearest neighbour. Okay, so we have to, I think, if I'm right in this. We have to prioritise how we serve. And the best example of that seems to me to be from the story of the prodigal son. Okay, so there's not the story of the prodigal son, I'm sorry, the story of the Good Samaritan. Okay, so there's this guy smashed up, probably a Jew by implication, and three people come past. And the first is a religious Jew, can't do this, got to go and do something in the temple. The second, similar, goes past, got to do something further up. And then comes a stranger, a half-Jew in fact, someone looked down on by Jewish culture, sees him and deals with him, looks after him on the spot. Okay, so it's the law of the nearest neighbour, if I can put it that way. Yep. So if God has placed something in front of you that needs to be done, that is what you've got to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's sort of guidance, if I can put it that way. Okay.
So you could put that job in front of you, and you're like, this is where I can serve.
Yeah. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look broadly out there to see what the needs are in the world. Yep. And in fact, that's one of the positive things about the internet and so forth. We now have nearest neighbours, even in the Gaza Strip, if I can put it that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have nearest neighbours all over the place. We have nearest neighbours up in the Northern Territory and so on, okay, as well as nearest neighbours who might be in our household or our local church. So in that context, yes, I was guided by God. To work at Moore College. So I
like that language of guided rather than called.
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? And I wonder if, like, in terms of people put that vocation lens across, like being called is more to do with just how our culture has developed rather than really what the Bible's saying. And I think that's what maybe you're saying is that if we're going to look at that language and then critique it through the lens of the Bible rather than through the lens of culture.
Yeah.
I remember that, what was his name? The name's completely gone, but he was on the Shock Absorber podcast and he was talking about we use the Bible to critique or affirm culture sometimes, and I feel like that's a good way to look at it. And I think you very carefully and lovingly explained to me that maybe don't use that language in the way that you did, Joel. And that was cool. I like that.
Well, that is true. If I'm going off at a tangent here, so by all means cut it out.
Just make sure you're in the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yep, go.
So what should be our Christian stance towards our culture?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question, and it's one we face all the time, especially as we've been being more and more pushed into a corner, and certainly have been since the 1960s with the beginning of the sexual revolution and so on. And I recently had the privilege of listening to some lectures by Chris Watkins on biblical critical theory.
Critical theory, yep.
Yeah, okay. And he's now got his book is out. It's been out for a while. I had the privilege of being at the launch of the book 12 months ago, and then the lectures about 2 weeks ago. But he gave 3. I recommend that you might, if you wish, try and listen to those lectures. Go to New College, University of New South Wales website, and hopefully you'll be able to find your way through to where you can see those lectures. They're about an hour and a half each, 50 minutes delivery and about half an hour of answering questions. Both are worthwhile doing. But one of the things he is doing is examining, he's a philosopher at Monash University, and therefore he's trying to understand culture, our culture, on its own terms. Yeah. And that's important. So we're always, as human beings, tend to try and understand something on our terms, and therefore to bring it in obedience to us, if I can put it that way. Yeah. And our present culture does that all the time, very badly. Identity politics and so on. Lots of sad stuff going on. People just shouting at each other. Postmodernism is the dialogue of the deaf, as one philosopher wrote from London University. Well, it is. I mean, it's got some good things about postmodernism. We're much more aware of bad motives we've had as we've developed certain things in the past, and that is good. So you start to look to critique, you look critically at things. But the other thing about postmodernism is it's saying the only reality is my reality, and therefore you end up with a dialogue of the deaf. Yeah. You have a shouting match. Okay. So that's background. So Chris Watkins is a philosopher, and he's a good analyst, a very, very clear analyst of our present culture on its own terms, going back into sort of its earlier Enlightenment roots and so on. And he does that, and then he brings to bear the scriptures on that. What might we see? That is a biblical, critical theory, critical as in critique as well as yes and no.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
To bear on different aspects of our culture. And what you find, if you look carefully at the Bible, is that it will say yes to some things and no to others. That is, we don't have to be involved in a dialogue of the deaf, shouting at each other, but we do need to be involved in a truthful way with our society, critiquing it. Or I can put it this way, truth matters, but the truth about God matters above all.
Okay.
And one of the things you find out as you look at the development of our culture is that as we've moved away from God in our culture and our thinking over several centuries in different ways, our thinking has got more muddled, if I can put it, and also with some very, some very bad results, especially the sexual revolution. Sure, I'm happy to come back to that in a moment. Okay, so Chris Watkins' book worth buying at $55, let alone watch the lectures for free.
The lectures are on YouTube. I just found them.
Are they? Well
Yes,
done. How long are they?
They're on average probably an hour and a half each, and there's 3 of them.
Good. Okay,
So I'm
so
gonna
it's
have
on
to check that
YouTube.
out.
So
Yeah.
what'd you type in to get it?
Chris Watkins' New College Lectures. No, they come up first result. So you'll be able to
thank
find them
you
if
very
you want.
much.
No worries.
Good.
Uh,
Sorry, I've lost my way.
No, actually,
Okay.
I'm really enjoying it because I think it probably answers the question. You've been a college lecturer for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I think in talking to us about those things, you're kind of showing us what you do for a job.
Right, okay.
Which is actually a really good way to understand.
Yeah, sure.
Just in the interest of time, because we do have to jump out to the staff meeting soon.
I thought you were going to have 2 hours of this.
Well, we're getting close.
How long was Lou?
Lou was 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay, we only got to go 2:16 then.
Yeah, so we're at an hour and 15.
I'm not
at the moment.
competitive, you understand.
Oh no. I'd like to ask the final question, and
Yeah, sure.
I feel like we've. I might get you. We might get you back on to do a part 2. I think as well.
Yeah, I feel like we've got so much.
I think there's a lot more to go.
Okay,
But
work out your questions.
let's
for
let's.
part 2. Yeah.
Well, let's that's a good question. Well, maybe people can send in some questions. That would actually be pretty fun.
Yeah.
If people want Rob to answer some questions, theological questions,
Yeah.
that would actually be a really cool way to do it. So put them in the YouTube comments or send them to me. Having said that, we've only barely scratched the surface of your life. But what do you think that you wish you knew as a younger Christian that you know now?
Well, I wouldn't quite put it that way. Typical reply from Robert Doyle, isn't it? Yeah. I'd love to be interviewed by the ABC because I'd probably say to them, look, I suggest you ask the question this way.
Yeah, that's right. Then I can answer.
I don't think that's actually the question.
And the
you're
reason
asking.
you need to ask that way is because we won't go off
This
on
is
the
the way I know
ABC.
how to
All right,
answer
let me
it.
just have another drink.
That's right. Are you planning to be a politician though?
No,
Because
thank you.
that's a kind of politician answer.
No.
You can ask your question. I'll
I'm very
give my
grateful
answer.
for those who are politicians. I think it's a very hard job.
I think it would be a very hard job.
very hard job. Okay, so what was the question again? I've lost.
What do you wish you knew as a
Okay.
younger Christian that you now
Okay.
know
Look,
now?
I think I would say to myself as a younger Christian, from here, looking back, well, how long have I been a Christian? More than 50 years, probably 51 years, okay?
Which is very cool, by the way.
I don't know about it being cool, it's just the length of time.
Okay, well, I think it's cool.
Fair enough. I think I'd say, yeah, you were right to trust the promises of God. And you're right to expect God to keep those promises. And that is what has held you together.
Yeah.
I think I'd say that.
That's cool.
Back there. So, and I think if I was back there speaking to the 50-year older man now,
Yeah.
who is younger than Joe Biden, but not by much, I think I would say from back there, well, isn't God good?
Mm.
He does keep his promises, and it shows his goodness.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that I think that is what I'd say to most people. God is good. And in fact, he's good all the time. I think that would be a platform from which I'd try and understand what's going on in other people's lives and their minds, and seeking to, walk with them, give them any assistance I can. Yeah, God is good.
Mm. And it's important to have that reminder, I think,
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
again, in our sinfulness, we're always sometimes easily tricked into thinking that's not the case.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
So we come to the Sexual Revolution, another book I want you to read.
Well,
You can cut it out if you don't want to.
no. Why don't we?
Yeah.
You happy to come back next week?
I think so. I'll have to check in the diary.
I reckon. Let's
That's
do
this
that.
thing here.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
I think.
okay.
I think it would be cool to keep talking about those things.
Okay.
If you're
okay.
happy to do that.
Yeah, sure. But I'd be only speaking briefly about the Sexual Revolution per se, but I would be recommending a book to read.
No, that's fine. Why don't you?
Okay.
We could recommend a text for next week's podcast.
Yeah. Well, what's the recommended reading
Yeah.
before?
Okay. Now, this book I'm working on my head. Louise Perry.
I've read some of her stuff. Yep.
Okay.
Because she's not a Christian.
She is not a Christian. She is a journalist, but she also clearly engages in academic research, if I can put it that way. She's written a book, and the title roughly is, and you can look it up online, The Sexual Revolution and Why It Failed. It's not quite like that, but that's what it's about.
Yep.
Now, she throughout this book, I might say, here's a warning, she's not always on side with all Christian morality in this area.
The case against the sexual revolution.
The case against the sexual revolution. Good analysis, good to read. She's a beautiful writer, very clear thinker. What can I say about it? Read it.
Read it and then...
Look, the sexual revolution, folks, is the gift from my generation to yours. And that's in air quotes, the word gift.
All right, we'll clip that. That'll be the clip for your podcast, I think.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much,
thank you, guys.
Thank you. It was good fun.
Great talking with you.
Yeah, it was. And I think we'll continue the conversation. If it's not next week, we're going to do it because that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So much more to come.
So much more to come.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But we will wrap up this episode and say thank you very much to everyone listening or watching. And as always, we finish with a one way.
One way.
One way.
One way.